right now the Republicans are all hysterical about these Planned Parenthood videos. Here's the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation is that abortion is legal in the United States. That radical breakthroughs in medical science have been made in the last few decades using fetal tissue from legal abortions. The vaccines for polio, for rubella, for chickenpox, new discoveries for the treatment of Parkinson's, muscular dystrophy, diabetes. All of these things have been done and are continuing to be done. There's an enormous amount of research that's being done using the fetal stem cells that are abundant in the tissue from aborted fetuses and the like. And in fact, in 1993, Congress, including Mitch McConnell, voted to legalize and, in fact, support the donation of fetal tissue for medical research. And it was it was for a good reason. Because, we can solve some of these diseases. But now McConnell wants to defund Planned Parenthood, which doesn't provide abortion services. They refer out abortion services, God forbid. Not one penny of federal money is going for any kind of abortion services anywhere right now anyway, which frankly I think is wrong. I think if abortion is legal and it's a medical procedure that a woman wants and she's covered by Medicaid or Medicare, she should be able to just go to a hospital and get an abortion. I'm getting quite frankly sick and tired of this argument where I'm kind of going halfway. I had this on TV a couple nights ago. Where I think it was Horace was going off on, look, all this abortion that Planned Parenthood's doing, and I was buying into the frame basically. I said, well, no, but abortion referrals and services and things are only 2 or 3% of Planned Parenthood's budget. And he's like, oh, it's a lot more than that. And I'm like, no, it's only 2 or 3%. What I should have been saying, as my wife pointed out to me when I got home that night, she's such a great producer. What I should have been saying is, I don't care if it's 50%, it's legal. If you don't want it to be legal, make it illegal. But as long as it's legal, and by the way, if you make it illegal, I mean, this is the other point that I would make, and I made this point last night on television as well, and I want to make it again here, although I pointed this out, I think, Monday of this week. I'm old enough to remember the 60s and 70s and things like date rape weren't even part of the lexicon. And women, if a woman was looking for a job, she had to look in the women wanted section of the help wanted ads in the newspaper. And all the good jobs were in the men wanted section, and the women wanted section were waitresses and secretaries. I mean, that was life in the 1960s and early 1970s. But in 1961, the first birth control pill was approved by the FDA for sale. And by 1965, it was widely available. And that produced the so-called sexual revolution. Suddenly, people could have sex without worrying about pregnancy. And I was coming of age during that time. I was a teenager during those years in the late 60s. And I remember it quite well. And then in 1973, but even then, women were getting pregnant. Even, birth control is not 100% safe, and not every woman had access to birth control pills. And there were actually still some states like Connecticut where it was illegal for people to possess birth control. That law got knocked down, I think, in 65, Griswold versus Connecticut. So this all happened in the mid-60s. That women got control of their bodies, but they were still getting pregnant. But back then, at least when I was in high school, which was, the mid-60s, had I graduated, it would have been class of 69. So we're looking at 67, 68, 66, when I was in high school. I knew a number of women, girls, whatever teenagers, who had what were then called D&C operations. I think it's dilation and curettage or something like that. It's basically they open up the uterus and scrape out the inside. And the ostensible reason for these were to deal with difficult menstrual periods. And apparently that technique does work for that. But the vast majority of them were really just abortions. I mean, that's how you do an abortion. It's one way to do an abortion. They were early stage abortions. But you had to have the money to be able to go to the hospital and pay for it. And so it was an upper middle class thing. And the women who didn't have the money, and there was one girl in my high school that just stopped coming to school, vanished. I mean, there were several who stopped coming to school when they got pregnant and had babies, but this one woman in particular had a coat hanger abortion and died. I didn't know her well, but I knew who she was. She just vanished. And anybody who was alive in the 60s, particularly if they were teenagers, like I was, can tell you similar stories. So, and then in 73, Roe v. Wade legalized abortion all across the nation, and they no longer had to do this sham of D&Cs, and women now had complete control over their bodies. And what did we get out of that? The women's movement. And compare the number of women in the workplace now, or in college and classes other than music or English. I mean, my mom told me she got a degree with honors from MSU in English. And I'm like, why English? Well, A, I love English, and B, I went to college to find a man to marry. Right? That's what. Now, this was in the 1940s. But by the 1970s, that, it was no longer. It was like, I'm going to go to college and become a CPA. I'm going to go to college and become a rocket scientist. I'm going to go to college and become a doctor. Because women had control over their own reproductive systems. They had control over their bodies, which meant that they had control over their fate and futures. And I'm telling you what Mitch McConnell and these Republicans and the people who are doing these highly edited, very misleading videos want is they want to go back to the days of male supremacy.